Like I was saying, I was watching one of the major networks, a national network, the other night, and they had a piece on El Salvador. Supposedly they interviewed one of the leaders of the right-wing movement there. Now, we know each other, Barry, and you know that I can't stand right-wing dictatorships no more than I can stand left-wing dictatorships.
That's what I like about you. Go ahead.
But the truth is that the reporter, or whomever did the translation into English, because this leader of this group was speaking in Spanish, bent it, if we're going to use the word bent. I think it was an abomination. The right-wing leader was saying that El Salvador, the forces in El Salvador did not want communism, and they would not go in for a mishmash, any kind of a deal with the communists, because that's exactly why the United States had gotten its behind kicked in Vietnam. They tried to accommodate the communists, and the communists just rode roughshod right over the American peace talks, even when the United States was in Vietnam. What the reporter translated into English, and you know that I'm bilingual. I've been chairman of English and Spanish departments at various colleges in the area, so I am qualified to say that I do speak Spanish fluently, and English also. And the reporter translated that this right-wing leader was saying that the only thing the right-wing in El Salvador wanted was power and blood, power and death, quote-unquote. Death to the communists and power to the right-wing extremists. This was so totally far-fetched. I got very upset. My high blood pressure ran to my head. I turned all kinds of colors. Tried to get in touch with the network. Finally did after 2 hours. They claimed that they would amend, they would view the tape, amend, or correct the mistake by 11 o'clock. This was not done. I called them the next day and the day following. They still did not amend it on the air. I've been watching. I finally got...
In court, they say it. Turn the page, and I'm with you. I am tired of letting the press decide which faction shall win in places like Nicaragua and El Salvador. It's been going on since the days of communist China when we were told to relax, so they're nothing but agrarian reformers. I saw over this past weekend an exquisite bit of communist propaganda. I had lunch today with, he used to be a diplomat, but since we broke relations, he's now just a citizen of Taiwan. And we were discussing did you see the ice show, the figure skaters?
Yes, I did.
All right. Well, now, did you count the number of zingers that Peking shot into feeble American sponge-like impressionable minds and brains and hearts?
Very skillful propaganda on an extremely high level.
Yeah. Oh, man. But, I mean, I'll tell you why that exasperates me. I don't think our network bosses are dummies. I think the people who make deals like that are really without politics. I think they say, for instance, suppose a Catskill resort were to say, hey, you can film this great attraction up here, but I want at least 15 shots of this and no views of that. Not only would you say yes, but you'd come back and expect congratulations for having made such a great deal. We can photograph the whole spectacle. All we got to do is lay off those shots, which we probably wouldn't want anyhow, and do this 15 times in the course of the week, and we got it. I don't think they realized that they surrendered to a dictatorship. I hope they didn't. Because it went in the Soviet way and not in the spineless American way, it went so quickly I didn't even notice. But if you will pick up the phone and help me out, my number. You hired me as your lawyer, and I had to go into court and pretend I thought you were right. Here's what I'd say. It is a deepening of the humiliation America is undergoing when a major country like Russia gets a demonstration and reacts abruptly and emphatically and effectively. That shows America up. Upon your very serious observation, you see, nothing is easier than attacking American racism when you're in a country that has only one race. Right. Oh, the Norwegians, the Swedes, the Danes, they had rallies. They collected money for Autherine Lucy. You probably don't know that name. She was the first black student at the University of Alabama back in those tumultuous days. America is multiracial, multi-problemed, and we tackled the biggest problem of all, the racial problem. We deserve a Nobel Prize. America deserves a world award for what it's done against the racism and against the hatred and against the bigotry.
Absolutely.
Now then, these other countries that used to have just one race, I mean, France always had blacks because the French colonies were black, but you had one black piano player and one black diplomat here, and only the cultured blacks were visible in Paris. You didn't have your residents of Chad and Senegal and Dahomey coming in any great numbers.
Right.
Well, welcome, I say, to France, to the club. Racism is rampant in Sweden now. You've got your Yugoslav, your Greek, your Turk, your Italian, Turkish, your Italian workers moving in up there, and these poor blondes are freaking out. So you cannot have racism unless you got races. But the corollary is, folks, relax. Get those anti-American flags down. Burn them. Wherever you have races, you have racism. America better solved than most. I wish the French the same luck in solving their racial crisis that we have had. Luck and skill and goodwill and a lot of prayer meetings and honest people and earnest people on both sides, on all sides, and in spite of the inflammatory media, good, decent people stand up and insist that things be done in a brotherly way and the racists be put in their cages. It worked. Plaisir de parler avec vous, monsieur.
Au revoir.
Bienvenue aux États-Unis.
Au plaisir.
Thank you very much. Something I saw during the Hungarian Revolution, it never escaped me. Every couple hundred yards of the Austro-Hungarian frontier was being manned. See, the Red Cross was not allowed to go into Hungary to get the refugees out because that was communist territory. So volunteers agreed to go in. Every couple hundred yards would be a different group of volunteers. There'd be former British commandos. Right beside them, Belgian Red Cross workers. Right beside them, Dutch Girl Scouts. Right beside them, Norwegian medical students. And they would go into Hungary and get the refugees, bring them back across the canal. And I remember seeing a platoon of Germans with equipment. I didn't know there was such equipment. They had compasses. I think they had laser beams out there on the board. They let me look through lenses that made it daylight in the dark. These lenses were ground so finely they could borrow light from day after tomorrow. And I remember the Germans sitting up there barking instructions. Es gibt dort drüben ungefähr 24 Flüchtlinge. They're telling them where the Germans, where the refugees are coming from. They're coming across the canal. They're gathering. And meanwhile, Dutch Girl Scouts will be paddling across in rubber rafts to pick them up. You understand? So I give us a climate where we can at least say free enterprise again without having the ardent young people look at us like we're war criminals.
Right.
If we are the exploiters of the third world, and you don't know how to tell those sophomores that if it weren't for American technology and American business, the third world would in too many cases be living in grass huts fighting off alligators, and if it weren't for oil companies, American, going down there, they wouldn't be living in modern cottages with plumbing, sanitation, irrigation, education. They'd be living in the Orinoco River Valley, fighting off worse than alligators. So I think when we get capitalism and free enterprise back in the right light on center stage, then young people, instead of putting their hands on their hips and taking blood oaths with one another, never to go into anything as evil as business, I think it'll work itself out. Older, who were the big, incandescent, idealistic, hate American cadre. I think the very young are patriotic. I think they're ready to return to traditional values. I love the very young. But those bulge people in the middle, those sandwich fillers, the generation that was real big shot in the 60s, the conscience of the United States, these people have given us a problem because they not only do not believe in our economic system, they sneer at it. I mean, inwardly they seethe when you talk about free enterprise and equal chance for all, bring everybody into the capitalist system, the land of opportunity. They hate that kind of talk. They think it's criminal. Okay, step right this way, one and all. Are Are you spearheading a cause? Do you want liberation for your people? Do you want to overthrow some government? Go into business for yourself. Step right this way, folks. You've come to the right country, the United States of America. All you do is plant a bomb in some train station, some bus station, some airport. Make sure that we, your local, friendly, enthusiastic soldiers of the free press, make sure we local media have the name of your group, the full name and the correct spelling, and we will give you millions of dollars worth of free publicity. We will make you look bold, courageous, patriotic, glamorous, charismatic, lean and resilient in pursuit of justice. Step right up. You plant the bomb. Let us know who you are, and we will do the rest. No need to wait all the years to reach the people with your message. No need to develop scholars, literature, and philosophers. Why wait all those years it takes to develop a Gandhi, a Garibaldi, or a George Washington? You just plant the bomb in the train station. Let us know who you are. Woo, and make sure you have big scrapbooks. We will do the rest. We need hot stories. You terrorists need publicity. We are good for each other. Welcome to the United States, where the free press prevails. Ooh, would I like to get my intellectual hands, nothing physical, no violence. I'd like to get my intellectual hands on every single attorney. For some reason, usually a Jewish attorney who thinks it's so chic to pay his own way to Chicago and defend the Nazis. Ooh, that's really free speech, isn't it? I won't do it. I'll tell you why. Because I am not a hypocrite. It is hypocritical. Why are you defending Nazis? Because you know at the moment, and check your calendar and your stopwatch because this moment may not last. At the moment, you know the Nazis are nothing in America. So you can be a big deal, glowing in the dark, palpitating freedom of speech, compassionate attorney, and you pay your own way, and that Gucci briefcase, sets you aside at the airport, and you go in there and you defend those Nazis as long as the Nazi movement in America is nothing. You look me in the face. Suppose there were Nazi outbreaks, groups of the American army actually peeling away, refusing to obey orders except from local Nazis. Suppose 5 states formed a separate Nazi group. Suppose workers' movements were torn apart and the Nazis were fighting the anti-Nazis in the streets. Suppose there were martial law. Suppose the economy broke down and the swastika raised itself high over village square after village square in an increasingly larger part of the country. Would you then get on that plane and go to Chicago and defend Nazis? Of course not. You'd say, holy mackerel, what an idiot I've been. So I'm simply saying, why wait? Why do we encourage terrorism? I call it justice passions back when you dismantled, humiliated, eviscerated the FBI. Don't you wish we had the old-style FBI right now who could have these terrorists like picking up smoking squirrels by the tail out of a forest fire? Don't you? Look, here's our man. We've had them infiltrated and cross-infiltrated for years. Matter of fact, we had to let them do this bombing so as not to blow our cover. But, okay, here they are. These people will commit no more bombing acts or other acts of terror. We'll get back to what you said the first time. When you say we are one people, then what you mean is that my daddy and the Ayatollah are the same. No, we got into deep trouble in this country by sitting cross-legged on floors and pretending that we're all one people and one world, and let's listen to that one's folk songs, and let's listen to this one's history. Oh yeah, we're all one. We are not one people. We are of many different layers of, forgive the expression, civilization, culture, achievement, advancement, potential, given our present capabilities. We are all different. Now, when you said, forgive me for making a messy thing of this, but when you said we're all one people, I thought you were drifting back into that dreamy-eyed mystique of the 50s when we're all one. We thought that was a wonderful liberal American pretension. The Iranians taught us a little over a year ago just how much of one people we are. Every time the leader of Uganda bathes his feet in goat's blood before making a major policy statement, we see how much one people we are. Every time we see 30 Soviet divisions about to invade a neighbor for the crime of forming a free trade union, we see what kind of one people we are. So include me out of the one people battle cry, but include me in opponent parts of the ACLU. I've never spent weekends at ACLU retreats up in the mountains, you understand, and got to know all the personnel intimately, so I don't know whether my suspicion has much validity or not, but I suspect it nonetheless. Do you want to hear it?
Please.
I think the ACLU and other so-called civil liberties groups violate the first rule they teach in the Boy Scouts. The first thing they teach in the Boy Scouts is never help ladies across the street if they don't want to go, because it leads to violence every time. Now, I believe that the ACLU looked around with ACLU binoculars, and on ACLU radar, they picked up the crash, and they said, uh-oh, look at this, this will never do. In other words, I don't think there was a folk revulsion. I don't think the Jewish children across the country signed petitions saying, we are humiliated and we will not part, we resent being compelled. I don't think there was a single instance of that.
Exactly.
So I think it was a classic case of helping old ladies across the street who don't want to go. Turns up his nose and says the evidence is merely anecdotal, okay? What I'm telling you now is merely anecdotal, but by golly, it's a theory I cannot expunge from my feeble mind. The Russians, when we say the voice, we see the written text of a State Department note, a message from the president. I'm saying there's more to it than that. I have heard these meepy little State Department spokespeople talking about Iran, talking about Cuba, talking about Afghanistan. And I said earlier, I haven't met a single State Department spokesman who would last for 15 seconds on the Barry Gray show. Barry would eat him alive. Barry would not put up with that kind of weakness in a guest, much less in an American response. You must, and I'm talking now, yes, I'm talking about the physicality of the response, the actual person, the State Department person. Is he angry or is he shivering at his boots? Because he represents all America at that moment. The mackerel, where'd that come from? A different view. A different view from mine?
Yes.
You mean you take my beautiful philosophy, politics, epistemology, and don't agree?
I think you have a...
Прекрасно, я не бываю с вашим знанием русского языка, но, к сожалению, мы будем говорить только по-английски. Это шутка, вы не понимаете, это только шутка. Я это не всерьез говорю, это только шутка.
And if Time magazine doesn't name him Man of the Year, I'm going to cancel my subscription. Lech Walesa is the Man of the Year, whether he gets that official designation or not. Afghanistan simply does not count in the West. It was always a ridiculous, remote, forgotten part of Asia, literally the most isolated place on the planet Earth. And there is no feeling for Afghanistan here.
Days of at the home of Rick Sklar. At the time, he was program director, maybe even general manager of WABC radio here. He's now moved up to a big job with the network. He was very familiar with all music, and he just had a feeling for what the kids would like, and he rose very high on that highly valuable talent. And I didn't know anybody there. They were all famous. It was one of those parties where I was the only one there I never heard of, but I wasn't into the music personalities. I didn't know who was who. I didn't know who to get impressed about. Great old-looking bunch of boys and girls, I thought, and I was happy to be included. And I was sitting on a sofa off in one corner so I could sort of stay out of the way and watch. And there was somebody, at least one person there, who seemed to be aware that I had, at that time, a late-night radio show, and he allowed us how he listened every once in a while, and even commented on some recent shows. And I said, well, at last, I've established contact with somebody here. I didn't think I was going to make it at this party at all. I thought I'd have to run up and kiss Mrs. Sklar and shake hands with Mrs. Sklar and say great old evening without ever having exchanged a communication with anybody. I'm not criticizing them. I mean, I wasn't of that crowd. I had nothing to talk about with them. So finally I established contact with this one intensive-looking young man. We started asking each other all kinds of questions. And he knew a lot more. I didn't even know his name. And I asked him what his name was eventually. And he said, John Lennon. And I said, okay. I said, matter of fact, you look kind of like John. Well, it was John Lennon. That was my moment that I thought of. when I was told in Wisconsin that John Lennon had been murdered on the streets of New York City.
Just that he was a United States senator going to Moscow to talk to Chairman Brezhnev after the elections. It was that he is slated to become the next chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. The Soviet leaders, that he favors a Palestinian state, which would have been bad enough, but to go beyond it to say that he thinks such a state should be headed by Yasser Arafat, a man who leads an organization which persistently and publicly claims credit for the murder of women and children and diplomats and athletes, and which relies on terrorism, not only, as they put it, as a tactic, but as a strategy, and which is clearly and unequivocally committed in all of its public statements to the elimination of a member state of the United Nations, namely Israel. For him to say to the Soviet leaders, sotto voce, as it were, that he, the incoming chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee of the United States Senate, believes that a Palestinian state should be established in which the leader of such an organization will be its head, I think, is a really shocking and incredible statement.
Of that once proud ship called privacy is at the bottom of the Sargasso Sea, and those greasy squids are slithering through the portholes and have ever since the mid-1950s. I'm giving up on gun control. There is no way to keep guns out of the wrong hand. They're too small. They're too easily trafficked. I see no way to keep guns out of the wrong hands. Laws will keep guns out of the right hands. They will not keep guns out of the wrong hands. Somewhere I was almost looking a hole through, like the sun. If you narrow it down through a magnifying glass, can set fire to a newspaper. I look at those stories about Poland so intently. I expect page one to start smoking and all of a sudden catch fire. So I am grateful for what's going on in Poland, for the simple reason that in 1945, we won World War II. We quit. We gave up. We brought the boys home. We helped our former friends, our former enemies, and we just figured the world was going to live and let live, and we were going to live and help live. Little did we realize that the Soviet Union would be the new aggressor. They would make all the propaganda, and they would succeed in making too many people your age feel that America was the bully, America was the bad guy, America was insensitive to slums and poverty and poor people and everything, and that the Soviet Union was the champion of everything good. Every day that Poland stays on page one, every single day that little spark remains is one day where minds like yours will get cleansed and rebalanced. You don't sound like you need it. There are people who grew up through the education you grew up through the news on television, through the prevailing political thought that you grew up through, who think that Russia is just minding its business over there on the sidelines, and America, with its non-union lettuce, and the CIA and the FBI is the real villain. Is to learn how to think globally. Now, suppose you and I are at a dinner party together, and we are both with our wives or our girlfriends or with an attractive woman, okay?
Right.
I turn to your woman, I wink at her, I flirt with her, I grab her innocently above the elbow and sort of squeeze her arm, and you don't like the attentions I'm giving to her, and I look at you and I say, oh, come on, this is 1980, we're all grown-ups, we're all friends, don't let that bother you, don't be a square, I'm not doing anything wrong. And then you clear your throat and you start smiling at my wife, and I stand up and slug you. Then you're going to say to me, Barry, you have a double standard. You are being hypocritical.
Right.
When I do it, it's one thing. When you do it, it's another. And you will raise your voice because here's what's in your mind. I have caught Barry Farber in a duplicitous act. To make that known to 12 other people at the table is going to drive him away in embarrassment, and he's going to lose. He's going to feel awful. But see, Russia is unembarrassable. To catch them in duplicity, to catch them in a double standard, doesn't hurt them at all. They are waging war. It doesn't hurt their ego anymore to be caught in a double standard than it hurt the ego of the American Marine to act like he was a fox to fool a Japanese patrol in the jungle.
They are out to win a war. You remind me of a story that...
America broadcast, just ignoring the heinous charges directed toward us by the Soviet broadcast. Their broadcasts are just chock full of accusations about the capitalist dogs and on and on. You know what I was told about? They tell about mild tales of summer vacations on Nantucket Island. When are we going to answer this nonsense coming out of the Ministry of Propaganda?
Bullshit. I did not like the tone of voice. I mean, forget the words. Forget the diplomatic text and the way it looks in writing. The words of our representative at NATO headquarters. He sounded like a... He sounded like a high school student, grossly unprepared. He sounded like, forgive me, a sissy. He sounded like somebody who didn't mean a word he said and wishes it were over with and that he didn't have to say it. I was envying the Russian people for having a face like Brezhnev, for having a fist like Brezhnev, for having a credibility like Brezhnev. Our guy was like head squish on the school squash team. I feel very safe, although after John Lennon and Al Lowenstein and a couple of other people, nobody has that right. I feel morally unprepared to shake a fist and tell the Polish workers to go to it. But I feel also morally unprepared to say, cool it, fellas. My name's Farber. I live in freedom. I can say what I want to. I can go where I want to. I can do what I want to. You people are slaves of communism like your neighbors in East Germany, like your neighbors in what used to be Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, like your neighbors in Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, Czechoslovakia, and the Soviet Union, and communist China, and all the communist... Listen, say to them, it is not my role to tell them, cool it, fellas. Freedom is on the march. We were not guilty in 1956 of causing the Hungarian Revolution. We were guilty of getting overexcited, carried away. There were some irresponsible statements, not as many as are generally alleged on Radio Free Europe. This time, sir, we are absolutely circumspect. There is no radio voice in the West saying, come on, Poland, kick them real good. We'll come in and help you. Not at all. We are doing the exact opposite. We are taking the moral position. We are deliberately, programmatically, and at our full voice capacity, not telling the Poles that we are going to help. We are, in fact, telling the Poles that militarily we are not going to help, and we are arguing among ourselves openly as to how much non-military help we should give. I think our non-military help should be total. Sorry, sir, you sound somehow embarrassed by communism's embarrassment. I don't have time to pursue your particular motives. Now, get this, America. It's time you got shaken up. You're not 10 years old anymore. Lying, big deal lying, are you ready for this, ma'am, is a built-in necessity in the presidency. It is not something that presidents you don't like with 5 o'clock shadow who said nasty things about a congressional opponent many years ago in California happen to do. Lying is the necessity to lie and lie grandly is built in to the office of the presidency.
One more thing, Barry?
Yeah, sure.
You know, I thought it was very, very frightening when 100,000 people got up simultaneously and made the peace sign at the Lennon Vigil. Don't they realize, as you just said, that the Russians are in Afghanistan and may march into Poland, and peace is a bilateral thing, not a unilateral thing? It's a little frightening, isn't it?
Oh, sure. Well, it's frightening, except I am not afraid of those people. We do have a democracy. I don't fear that our democracy is endangered at all.
No, I'm talking about the people talking about peace, peace, peace. Don't they realize that peace, there are other sides that have to be consulted with peace? You just can't give poetry and music and create a world of love. This is a world of cosmic imagination, poetry, but it's not the real world. It's not the physical world.
No, but I mean I don't want to embarrass those people anymore. They have that phase is over.
He was out there, the Draft Resistors League, the Anti-Nuke Bunch was out there. And, I mean, these are the people that just look for these things.
Well, all right, sir, look, we can do two things about it. None of this original thing. Sir, Helen, with as much evil as there are in the world, with 30 Russian divisions ganging up on Poland, how much hatred do you expect me to have in my heart, and how much can you have in yours for Americans under a stupid, naive, myopic belief that all they have to do is wave a peace sign and they've somehow made something better? Under these conditions, which Mr. Buckley postulates, which William from Yale is like calling Picasso that painter from Spain, but go ahead. I do come from inside this very media arrogance. If you achieved influence in the media, you felt that you were kissed by tongues of flame that made you better than all the little people whose values you were offending. As a matter of fact, you could easily think of yourself as some great moral guru, and how lucky the public was in their mistaken, old-fashioned, perverted values. How lucky they were now to have you to look up to as you bravely rewrote those values. Pow, pow, pow. Take that, take that, take that. Now they've found each other. I am glad. Give me, I mentioned Bill Buckley reverentially a little bit earlier. Bill Buckley put it a different way in a different context. He said, I would rather be governed by the first 500 names in the Boston telephone directory than the entire faculty of Yale. Well, I would rather have my moral guidance from the first 500 names of the Lynchburg, Virginia telephone directory than I would by all the great, towering, quick-witted, sexy, in-with-it philosophers who have dominated much of what has passed for public culture in the past 40 years. I thought at the beginning of what you were saying, you were going to put down the clergy that preceded the moral majority as being one who never called the opposition evil. And I was thinking, at last, I found a wonderful, intelligent listener who is putting down the pacifist clergy, the left-leaning clergy of the 60s and the 70s for not just failing, but outright refusing to identify the Soviet Union as the leading threat to peace, as the number one dictator. Ooh, that gets you, doesn't it? Ooh, I squirted iced tea on your exposed nerve. Hot dog. Yeah, man, but I'm just glad the way I got you. Now speak. Were commemorating the slaughter of Polish workers 10 years ago in Gdansk. The Communist Party said, do not meet in a spirit of revenge, meet in a spirit of reconciliation. Now, folks, if I were offered a choice of reconciliation or revenge, I would take reconciliation every time, personally, politically, affectionately, every which way. Burying the hatchet is my personal favorite form of agriculture. But how fatuous of the Polish Communist Party to come out with that compassion, to come out with that reconciliation right now. Winston Churchill said it about the Nazis. He wouldn't even give them the dignity of calling them the Nazis, which is what they called themselves. He called them the Nazis. Yeah. And he said the Nazis are either at your feet or at your throat. And it's the identical thing with the communists. They're the same body types. You've seen body types, endomorphic, whatever. They're the same animal. The communists are either dragging you away, never to be heard from again if they hear you whispering some fantasy about a vote or a democracy or a new car or a trip to Pittsburgh or something. Or when they know that their game is gone and that people who hate them outnumber them 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 to 1, all of a sudden it's no more tough hand of the terror police. All of a sudden it's, please, brother Poles, meet in reconciliation and not in vengeance. Doctors call this a symptom communism. I don't think any system has ever deserved its present misery quite as much as the communists have. They are about Senator Alexander, General, and perhaps soon to be Secretary, and perhaps not soon to be Secretary of State. I am amazed at the folk opposition. I do not respect this opposition the way I have respected other opposition. Sometimes I think those who disagree with me are noble. Sometimes I think they are noble and wrong. I think many of you have been ignoble, wrong, and guilty of diseased thinking. Isn't it amazing? If you had this kind of disease, if you had cholera, they wouldn't let you out of the house. Regardless of your race, creed, or color, they would bang, bang, bang that quarantine sign over your door, and we would be spared infection from you. But mental disease can be as flagrant, as malignant, as rampaging and rapacious as any other kind. We're supposed to say, okay, thank you very much, Barry Farber, your WMCA talk. Oh, yeah, we want to hear your opinion. Oh, please call us and give us your opinion. Oh, diseased. I've heard a lot of mental illness over the last hour. I will try sternly and effectively to deal with it. I will fail. I will not change any of your minds. I will not cure any of that disease, but I will go to bed tonight saying, hot dog, I hit him real hard. Now, let's just listeners who said General Haig was too close to Nixon, too close to Watergate. We don't need a military man. What arrant rot. Just arrant rot. I mean, does that little word the kids love so much compare to arrant rot? I'd rather have a troy ton of that stuff I don't like to talk about on the air than an ounce of arrant rot, because arrant rot is by far more foul, and that's exactly what we have heard. Plain old diseased thinking. You know, it's rough being, I'm sure that when somebody from a Nigerian tribe in the jungle goes to Oxford University and graduates summa cum laude, he has an awful time going back to his tribe, because he understands the real world and he understands his tribe. To his tribal brothers and sisters, their world is very real, just as real as the world in Oxford. And it must be perplexing simply to have too much comprehension of too many different points of view. It is confusing. It is such a luxury to be a partisan, foaming at the mouth, shaking your fist. You know who the devil is, right? You know who the angels are. There is no confusion. Ooh, that's like intellectual free love. You know, you feel, you palpitate. Opposition, questions, you don't want that. You don't need that. That annoys you. All right. I feel like that jungle tribesman educated in Oxford, now I'm back trying to deal with the tribal elders dancing around the bonfire. Because what I have to say will be infuriating to you who are not yet away from the campfire. What I have to say to you is Watergate is a historical hiccup in a jungle of thunderclaps, of real historical thunderclaps. It is not of the order of importance that you have deigned it and tried to make it. Now, at that point, I can see you putting your hands on your hips and saying, why, you mean you're condoning lying? Or you're condoning breaking in? You're condoning cover-up? Hugger-mugger, a pox, none of the above. I merely insist. By the way, many of you wish you could throw me into that black pot in the middle of that jungle clearing and stir me with a big log until I'm done to your satisfaction, merely because I insist that the so-called crimes of Watergate be put into context with other recent presidential crimes, and you don't want to hear any of that. You insist on making Nixon uniquely hateful. I'm sorry, folks. Watergate will never make it in the hearts and minds of sophisticated people in the world today. It will make it into history only as the hand grenade that fell in among the presidential tangerines during the time of Nixon and destroyed his presidency. As for real merit, Watergate lacks it. It is a butterfly's belch. It is not a thunderclap. So you who are still hung up on the association of General Haig, who, if Watergate had a hero, was definitely it. The way he orchestrated the nation from behind the scenes, the things we now know about General Haig's stewardship over a very turbulent and potentially unstabilized White House. Wow, makes me admire him all the more. We don't want a military man. I thought we settled this. I mean, don't you realize that thinking is disconnected as well as diseased? It is the fruit of 35 years of insane anti-militaristic propaganda. You want everybody to think that everybody with a uniform wishes he were goose-stepping, wishes he were clicking his heels, wishes he were throwing his right arm forward in a Hitler salute, wishes he were occupying Poland und das Sudetenland. Heute haben unsere mütterliches Aufwarten die Schwastik über Warschau gestellt. Wir fallen gegen Norwegen. You think that there's a Nazi coiled up inside every uniform. All they want to do is obey orders. Obey orders. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. I refuse to sit still for the insane propaganda that has dictated so much drivel, just powered, corkscrewed drivel into otherwise very healthy American brains. Military men obey orders. Obeying orders is Nazi. Nazis obeyed orders. We defeated Adolf Hitler because we gathered more people who obeyed more orders better than Adolf Hitler did. Give me a disciplined military statesman in the tradition of General Marshall, of General Dwight Eisenhower, of General Omar Bradley. I think that's what we've got in Alexander Haig, and I wish him luck. And not by any trashy little old victory like he won here today, 44-30, peace conference in Yugoslavia. And the host of the American delegation was a big deal close associate of Tito. And I soon learned that my comments at the American delegates' table for lunch and dinner, my comments were completely unwelcome. I learned to keep my mouth shut. They could, and here I was talking about how the people that I met in the streets did not feel free. They did not look free. They did not act free. The standard of living was wretched. It was much better in Austria across the border that way. It was much better in Italy across the border that way. And Italy lost the war, and Yugoslavia allegedly won the war. And I was told, no, forgive me, I'm what they call in Psychology 101, getting it off. I'm thinking back, my fist is physically clenched at the moment, because I'm thinking back with a sort of a vengeance to all those intellectuals and professors on the American delegation, and how they apologized for this right-wing twerp. He didn't belong on the delegation anyhow. He's a student observer from the National Student Association, and forgive America, please, for having the likes of this 21-year-old loudmouth talking about how the people in the streets don't look free, and who obviously understands none of the complexities of changing an economy from capitalism over to a more equitable system of distribution. I lived to have the pleasure, get this, of not just those academagogues. I lived to have the pleasure of the Tito confidant, host of the American delegation himself. His name is Vladimir Dedier, fought with Tito in the woods and the caves and the hills. Vladimir Dedier himself, about 15 years later, defected, came to the West, and wrote a book where it looks like he just stole everything I gave him over the dinner table there in Zagreb. I mean, a complete recantation of all that cant, and a complete, coming out with his hands up. It was slavery, it was consumer fraud, communism, it was the same as Hitler. Oh, I loved Dedier's revelations,
One thing, Barry.
With yourself, except maybe your moral wiring is different from mine and from most of the rest of us. You, sir, have on your hands the blood of your fallen comrades. You, in a classic textbook way that I'm surprised people still fall for, provoked exactly what descended upon you in my beautiful hometown of Greensboro, Thanksgiving 1979.
Not surprising.
Read your own Communist Workers' Party's posters, read the handbills, read the propaganda signs. You were saying that this was a kill the Klan rally. Now, the Jews of Germany never had a kill the brown shirts rally. They had a please leave us alone, and please don't kill us, and please don't harm us, and please let us go. They didn't even have those kind of rallies, but they certainly not provoke the Nazis into murder. You provoked the Nazis into murder, and against little baby Doc in Haiti. I am co-equally against fascism. But the point is, sir, and you don't like this, you call me a fascist. I'm not going to call you what I suspect you are. But you must join in now behind the overwhelming majority of Americans who've shown us at the polls that we recognize that whereas all dictatorship is bad and all repression is evil, we must concentrate on the dangerous dictatorships first. And, sir, the dangerous dictatorships, dangerous to America, dangerous to freedom, all happen to be communist dictatorships these days. I know that bothers you. I mean, I know you really wish there were a great fascist dictatorship threatening to gobble up its neighbors so that we could take the spotlight off communism. I'm sorry, sir, that spotlight is on communism. I didn't put it there, but I would simply love to do my patriotic part to keep it there without letting that spotlight quiver too much when the likes of you deliberately bump into it. Heard you and other people, I think, and maybe that previous guy had told me that there were some people showing up in swastikas.
It is true, Barry.
Let me tell you what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. I am not going to do what the Vietnamese peace marchers did. Whenever we saw Viet Cong communist flags in their parades, we'd say, "Holy mackerel, whose side are you on? Do you want a communist victory or just American disinvolvement?" And these meepies simply looked at us and said, "We can't help who marches in our parade." Well, listen here, I can sure as hell help who marches in my parade.
Absolutely.
And the minute I see a swastika, I told Lily. Lily drove me to this Captive Nations thing, and I said, "Lily, I see one swastika, because I've never seen a swastika in all my Captive Nations efforts." I said, "But if I see one swastika, I'm going to forget about the Soviet mission and forget about the Soviet Union, and I'm going to talk about that swastika right then and there." I talked to Peter White-Tennis, Lithuanian Freedom Fighter. I said, "Peter, not going to be any Nazi boys around." He said, "Are you kidding? Not if I have." In other words, Peter was with me not just in words, but in melody. So may I call upon you to disarm your fear? Believe me, if there are Nazis there, I'll be sensitive to them. And meanwhile, the fellow you are doing, the reason I'm stammering is I'm so grateful that I have a microphone to talk back, because what you do is done to so many people who are too helpless they can't respond. You, sir, have to forgive me for talking while you're interrupted. Here should know. I want to grab every single American by the collar and say, "Hey, the Poles are unafraid. We don't accept the fact that this is a popular uprising." I say, "Well, the Poles don't like communism," and they put me down at them. Not anymore. I feel so vengeful being Barry Farber today. It's so much fun going around to those same people. If they've got the guts, if they've got the ego, if they've got the honesty, if they've got the honor, they say, "Gee, kid, you were right." Most of them don't. They pretend that the argument never came up in the first place. All Poles hate communists. Do you understand that, Mr. and Mrs. Big Newspaper of New York? Do you understand that, Mr. and Mrs. State Department? Do you understand that, Mr. and Mrs. America? All Poles hate communism. Now, write that down. Let's take lesson 2. All peoples under communism hate communism. And then the last lesson before the commercial is the Russians fear that this will spread because Russia has workers too. Russia has people too, and they don't want to live like that anymore either. So this is communism's most tortured hour, and we are spectators. We do not count. And this may be very good. We are trapped in the grandstand this time. The Hungarians expected us to send supplies. Lech Walesa, the Polish workers' leader, knows we're not even going to send flashlight batteries. We are joyously irrelevant. We are watching communism's most difficult moment. While pretending to argue with them, the fact that we are important only because some Polish Americans send packages and money to Poland shows our blithering ridiculousness on the world stage right now. Number 2, Germany is shouldering a larger share of the burden. It should shoulder even more. Japan is shouldering next to nothing.
Well, why did we let it go there?
We did not say, "Okay, Japan, keep your guns ready because we may fight together someday." We said we're going to take all of your weapons, throw them into sulfuric acid, and spray it over the Mindanao Deep. We disarmed Japan, and it is now time to rearm Japan and insist that Japan take its rightful place in the defense of the democracies of the world. He said, "Barry, look, the shoe industry is in Italy, and the textile industry is in Korea," and he could have added North Carolina. "And what is there left to defend?" Well, after we got over the obvious infuriation of that question, namely defending the best society ever called upon to defend itself, I had a few minutes, these minutes in the news break, to think over whether or not I should really give him the answer to his follow-up question, which is, okay, Barry, zero in on the industries that we've lost. What is there to defend? Now, I'm going to say something that in my personal life I would never say to a friend who felt down. But I will say it to a nation that feels down. We hear similar stories from my personal friends. What is there left? And I don't want to tell them the truth. I like to sympathize with them. I like to gurgle. I like to cluck. I like to make them feel good. I don't look them in the eye and tell them, look, you were a hot shot in high school. You were a big hot shot in college. You got habituated to the world giving you everything it wanted, all those touchdowns. And now you can't jog a quarter of a mile because you're too fat and you're too out of shape and you smoke too many cigarettes and you thought everything was going to keep on coming and it didn't, and now you're hopelessly behind and you're blaming the world. Well, America in 1945 literally had everything coming to it, and America deserved that because we went and defeated the most evil forces in the history of the world, the Nazis, and then we gave countries their freedom back, and we had all the production, we had all the power, and we just thought that the world was going to continue to favor us and take care of us. We didn't know that we would get calcified with complacency, that standards would drop, that illiteracy would go on the rise, that American workers would stand around saying, we will not, or we've got a good tough union, you can't talk to me like that, and don't you, and you grievance committee, and I don't care if the work is shoddy, it meets industry standards. No, we're definitely going to be like that pot-bellied, over-smoking, homesick for his earlier life, faded athlete, okay? If you really want to get the industry back, I mean, mind you, now those same shoe factories may not come back from Italy, those same textile factories may not come back from foreign countries, from Korea, from Taiwan, but if you really want to have an industrial America again, then you've got to start jogging, you got to start doing push-ups, you got to start hurting a little, you got to start working longer and working better and raising standards and meet competitive prices and get that old whambo-zambo the Japanese have. You know, they actually have little pep rallies. I'm not suggesting this. It's strictly a Japanese art form. It'd be I'll never do it. I promise you I'll never do it, but the Japanese do. They gather in the parking lots of factories on their own time a half hour before work, and they have a pep rally vowing to do better and better and better for the glory of the firm, and they end with, and you guessed it, a clenched fist and a bonsai. Now, when you are ready to do that kind of thing, then you come back to me and complain, what is there left to defend? The factories are over in Taiwan. And yes, because that's where the American hustle is now. We invented it. Would you like to reopen the bottle and take a nice drink, Partner? Collective in the plights that they addressed themselves to. They were very concerned about the plight of the Cambodian, the Vietnamese, the Laotian peasant then, but I haven't heard a word from them about those peasants since the communists took over. I think a certain consistency is required. If taking anti-Israel positions, Zionism is racism and genocide, and everybody started lining up with the PLO terrorists. All of a sudden, many of my Jewish friends began to criticize the United Nations. And it was my lonely job to put my hands on my hips and turn unto them and say, where were you in all the years when the UN was letting every free country down except Israel? Where were you when they abandoned everybody behind the Iron Curtain, when they abandoned everybody in the communist countries, when they simply threw up their hands and gave up on anything involving human rights anywhere, when they couldn't even define aggression after all those decades of wonderful cuisine? And then they attacked Israel, and then everybody goes up in arms. Okay, I commit turnstile justice. They do. They don't seem to mind it. They yawn at it. They must. I have never yet had a judge call me. People call me from the water department and tell me things in great anguish and pain. I've yet to have a judge call me in all my years in New York and say, Mr. Farber, please we don't want to let these criminals go. There's not enough space. City Hall isn't cooperating. We've got no budget. The people don't care. Please. No, I haven't. In the West, I have never been to Poland. So I'm not trying to say, folks, vote for me against the people who disagree with me. I don't want to make anything that self-serving or that tacky, the issue of the first hour of this broadcast. But I have talked to Poles and Polish Americans, ones, you know, whose parents are born in Poland, who were born here, who leave me with my mouth not just hanging open, but literally unclosable. I got to close my mouth manually with both palms of both hands, one under my chin and one on the top of my head after I hear what they're telling me. They're telling me things like, Barry, come on, this is no anti-communist uprising. This is a labor dispute, which is pure communist. The communists would love to have us think this is a little labor dispute, the kind you see in Pittsburgh, Detroit, New York City, Jakarta, Indonesia, a little labor dispute. And then you heard, if you were listening yesterday, a man who told me he was a Polish American saying, come on, the Poles over there are just as loyal to their government as we are to ours, as though decent people are always loyal to governments. I heard what we should do. If you wish some pain-in-the-neck broadcaster had been hocking you before Pearl Harbor or before 1939, a doctor, isn't it amazing? A doctor is expected to go to med school and notice little clusters of cells forming that might spell trouble. We don't say, doctor, you're a maniac, you're an alarmist, you're a conservative. To hear what I'm not saying, because I know how some of you are going to take this. I will touch part of the Great Wall. I will look at all these smiling citizens of a slave state as they cavort through their wares display, their goods selling, their propagandistic tour in America. Fair enough. The point is, I would also go to an exhibit about, let's say, South Africa. Diamonds, Bloemfontein, the republics for blacks only, and the Transkei. I want to know about all that. So you see, I would go to the Communist Chinese exhibit. I'd shake hands, I'd smile, I'd turn around, I'd go to the South African exhibit, I'd man about town, woo, Gucci bag full of brochures at the end of the day, great old bunch of boys, a lot of nice people, I'll bet you some good things to eat. Those Chinese acrobats, I've seen them. I've seen the nationalist Chinese acrobat. They gain altitude in the air. You know, they jump across, it looks like they jump a mile and a half. But they gain, you know, when you and I leap forward, we kind of fall on our bellies. They gain altitude in the air. Now, those are the nationalist Chinese. I'm sure the communist Chinese are just as good. They have more people to choose from. Now, I want to talk in this next half hour to one of you typical double-standard liberals. Will at least one double-standard liberal step forward and talk to me? I need you. Please make a house call on me. I want to talk to one of you political indignants out there who would go to the Chinese Communist Pavilion and just marinate in their dishwater if they would let you, and just have a fantastic, and just intertwine like long-lost lizards with all these wonderful visitors from Communist China. But who would picket the South African exhibit, okay? Now, will one of you double-standard liberals please call me? I need you. The world needs you badly. Call right now. And tell you why. Because South Korea and Taiwan are authoritarian regimes. The communist country...
Authoritarian is just like Russia.
I know. I'm well aware. Sir, now wait. Wait a minute. I put you on hold. You ask a very valid question. Are you afraid I'm going to answer it to the satisfaction of the public? Now, come on, sir. I didn't interrupt you. I am against all dictatorships, okay, and I'm resoundingly against torture, always have been. Have your secretary type it out and I'll sign it, okay? However, fascism, there is no malignant fascist dictator in the world today. There is no fascist country that is about to send tanks into its neighbors. The only malignant dictatorship is communism. Communism. Learn how to say it and get comfortable with it, because we've got to face a lot of it in the years ahead. Now then, how dare you expect me to stand there with my hands on my hips, frowning at a smoldering cigar butt in the gutter on Main Street while a forest fire is raging all around the town? because of plain old common sense priority, I tell it like it is more about the communist world than about what is left, and thank God it's very little, of the fascist world. That was put in the air conditioning system in the 50s that makes people jellify when they hear those words and look funny at those of us who use those words a lot, as if to say, oh, red paint, witch hunter, Cold War mentality. Yeah, no. Everybody on our side of the Iron Curtain prefers our way, and everybody on their side of the Iron Curtain prefers our way too, and that gives me hope.
They ever get it
understood why the communist countries are anti-Semitic. They need anti-Semitism. They are playing on the historic anti-Semitism of those peoples in an attempt to isolate the anti-communists. If they can identify anti-communist with Jew lover, I grew up in the South. This is exactly how the segregationist forces played the game. The liberals who hated segregation dared not be branded a nigger lover. You understand? Same thing now. There is official state anti-Semitism in the Soviet Union and in Poland, so that anybody who stands up and says, hey, we're being treated in a miserable, we want freedom, they'll say, what's the matter? You're saying the same thing the Jews are saying. You a Jew lover or something? And that's what they use as kind of a psychological flamethrower to keep them down. This explanation...
Czechoslovakian border.
You mean you were injured by Russian gunfire? That's a major headline. If that's true, young man, you say...
I got news for you. They iced it up. In fact, I was reprimanded because I was not supposed to return fire because I might, quote, hit an innocent civilian.
Will you please stay where you are? Over a
German territory.
Uh-huh.
And the Soviets have in West Germany, as in many other countries, what they call SLM, a Soviet Military Liaison Mission. It's MLM. It's the embassies. They are, quote, civilians, unquote.
Right.
They all wear civilian clothes.
Right.
But by international law, they must have plates, car license plates, identifying them as being part of the Soviet mission.
Right.
I was sitting in the back of a truck because I was a sergeant, and I was guarding some equipment and paper that we had, moving them from one place to another. And I know it sounds like a bad James Bond movie, but it really happened. I see these two cars come up, and I looked at the plates, and they were behind us, and I saw they were Soviet. And I got the driver's attention, and they tried to force us off the road. And when that failed, because I happened to get the driver's attention, and he saw them coming around, and he veered to the shoulder, but didn't go into the ditch, which was running alongside of it, they opened up on us. And after this incident, the captain of our unit chewed me out because he said if you had hit one of those guys, I didn't hit anybody. Apparently I missed, at least I think I missed. He said if you had hit and killed one of those guys, there would be an international fact that you killed a civilian.
Do you mean that Russians fired on you from Soviet diplomatic cars in West Germany? Well, that's the most arrogant act I have heard of. I know that we are dealing with an arrogant enemy. I didn't know they were that arrogant. I thought they were that arrogant, but perhaps a little more respectful and afraid in 1970 than they are now. You are a major news source if indeed these stories are true. Now, I'm certainly not impugning you. You sound honest to me. You've passed the lie detector test of my inner eardrums, but I want to know more, and now is not the time or place. But I'm going to flip you over. I really would like to have it. I think somebody who writes articles for newspapers, magazines, or perhaps books, or memos to president-elects or presidents-elect should know about you. Thank you very much.
That's an anti-Semite now. I've discussed this with you before, and it's very interesting. You see, the whole theory of Marxism, and this is the heritage of Marxism, Marx and Lenin. The theory was that the Jews, as a nation, or a moribund group that would disappear and would not assimilate and would stay apart from the classless society. They would remain a class unto themselves. Now, even the early Jewish Marxists were not Jews. I got a whole list here: Rosa Luxemburg, Paul Axelrod, Trotsky. They fought for the revolution not as Jews, but they're in effect anti-Semites.
Here we go again. except we may not be as lucky as we were last time. Sometimes you have a cardiac episode, a heart attack, and you don't know how bad it is. And then 5 years later, your doctor may tell you, we were very, very concerned. I didn't want to mention that we thought we had lost you. Well, do you know how close, folks, we came to losing ourselves in the 1960s? The burn, baby, burn, and the all here now, and the off the pigs. Yeah, we were very, very close. There were people hoping we would go into racial civil war. You don't need an organized civil war like the one back in the 1800s that they write books like Gone with the Wind about. It could just be like a national uncontrollable race riot in 16 different places. We were close to that Vietnam War tensions. Well, the one thing we must learn in time is that the media is a mischief-making factor in these things. Now, just as Hitler and Mussolini used Spain, and the communists too, to test the weapons of World War II, I want to use radio right now as a weapon for peace, as a weapon to foil the would-be troublemakers. As it is, they use us like yo-yos. They know exactly how to manipulate us. They know how to get those headlines. They know when to throw bricks in time for which newscast. They know how to get us fighting each other, to give them exclusive interviews, and who can write the more lurid stories. And we, the media, all we say is free press, First Amendment, we've got the right. And I am calling upon my brethren in the media to sober up in time. Now, look at Crown Heights. That's my Spain. What Hitler used Spain for warlike purposes, I want to use Crown Heights to make a peaceful example. The blacks and the Hasidic Jews of Crown Heights were portrayed to be almost on the brink of civil war. It was a media happening. It was a media manufacture. The media did its best. This ought to be a crime. If I, Barry Farber, throw a brick into a crowd, I am inciting to riot. The media was inciting violence, all in the name of free press. Well, the media looked elsewhere, hostages or something, who knows, and Crown Heights had a chance to quiet down. Now the media is gearing up for, get this, it's a juicy news story. Oh, we're going to come in 4 points ahead of Channel 5 on this, and I'll bet you, look what we... to counter a planned white power rally sponsored by the National Socialist Party. That's the Nazi Party, folks. A black civil rights organization calling for a massive turnout. Do you see what I'm talking about? Each side will help the other by the blood streaming down faces. Oh, national news cover. Oh, the news celebrities there just God, soaking everything in through their avaricious pores. And I'm saying, we've got a free press. We've got a press absolutely free to cut our own throats and cause what is no longer a game, folks. It is beyond the dimensionality of a good, hot story. Do I call for censorship? Do I want repression? No, I'd much rather see responsibility in the media. But we haven't seen it lately, and we certainly have no guarantee that we're going to see it now. The newsrooms right now are drooling. Believe me, what? I bet you there are trucks from paper companies bringing extra bibs into the service elevators of networks right now because they're drooling. They can't wait. Swastikas? Buffalo? Blacks? Oh, that's got everything. These wispy little filaments, these spider-webby, spined, smiling do-gooders who limousined into the ghetto, who thought all you had to do was watch TV and cheer for the football team with more blacks, who thought all you had to do was sit on church floors cross-legged on Sunday night and sing Kumbaya with people of different races. Oh, Mac, we've got to be tough, realistic brothers. first. Everybody else is either a Croatian or a Serb.
Okay, well, what you act was in Croatia was actually in real Slovenian.
Well, you know, I'm amazed because to an outsider, to me, they're all alike. I know that there are wars over the differences among Serbian, Croatian, and Slovenian, but you got to excuse me. All I know is that when I took that train, that express train in Zagreb, it was a Brzovoz, but by the time I got to Ljubljana, it was a Brzovlak.
Yes, that statement does not hold true. We know, I've known in school, I knew so many Jewish anti-Semites, all SDS were anti-Semitic, were pro-Palestinian and so on, predominantly Jewish organizations, so the state doesn't hold. It was a school strike of 1968 in which he exposed the anti-Semitism of the dissident groups that were trying to that discharged predominantly Jewish teachers, and his statement never again is a valid statement.
Okay?
The editors read Irvin, I-R-V-I-N-E.
A heat-seeking missile for accuracy. You have been hit with, as I have been, with charges that I have been the Grand Dragon of a Jack the Ripper Academy, which is what my primary opponent threw at me when I was fighting for the Republican nomination in 1977, until you are hit with charges that you and a bunch of other celebrities are part of a pyramid club. You gag. You can't believe what is coming at you, and believe me, you say a lot of dumb, irrelevant things when you are honest. The guilty ones are the crafty ones with a game plan already formulated. A bit like the BBC used to give instructions to the Dutch underground. Okay, let patriots across the land take this address down. It is what they're doing. Reed Irvine, and in our own locality, Murray Barron, and other soldiers of the free press, modern Paul Revere's, warning us not that the British are coming, but that the perverted media are already here. Go ahead and give that at dictation speed. I want wouldn't it be great? Because see, the only way to fight our media and still keep this America is not by government censorship, not, God forbid, by assassination or professional assassination or blacklisting. The only way to do it is when they realize they can't fool us anymore. And when they try to pull something like that, a dam breaks and engulfs them with indignation the next day. Ooh, I love it. Go ahead. Just nodded, but with your foreknowledge and acquiescence, you allowed Brother Billy to go to Libya, meet with Colonel Gaddafi, use the name of the President of the United States, and arrange some unusual deals. He was initially given a loan, quote-unquote, of $220,000 as part payment of his future commissions. Did it occur to you, sir, this is to the President, why out of 225 million Americans, Billy Carter was chosen for this beneficence? You know that Colonel Gaddafi and Libya are avowed enemies of the United States and have threatened to blow up our bases. Perhaps you say you are not your brother's keeper, but the fact is that you nurtured, fostered, and encouraged this unusual relationship, and our friends across the seas are wondering what the President of the United States is up to. Since all this happened with your full knowledge, we must ask that you now take definite action to redeem the integrity of our nation. A, issue an order forthwith to abrogate this arrangement between Libya and your brother. B, your family should at once pay off this loan and sever all connections. It is in Congress for an avowed enemy of the United States to have the brother of the President of the United States on its payroll. In any other parliamentary country in the world, this involvement would be cause for impeachment. Okay, them with their hands in the cash register. Ooh! Ma'am, don't you want to bring honesty back to this country? I am so glad that your point of view, which paralyzed us in the late 50s, all through the 60s, I am so glad, ma'am, that you are becoming exotic. I think we should keep the likes of you around for research, if not for breeding purposes. Slav border one time, we just come in from Italy, and they jerked us off the train like some late-night movie and took away our passports, didn't tell us a thing for an hour and a half. We didn't know whether we were under arrest in a communist country or not. Turns out we were not. Some people just enjoy psychological lordship over others. And these Yugoslav communists loved psychological lordship over two Americans. They didn't have to tell us a thing, not a thing we, the superpower, could do except sit there and shut up and be sure not to walk more than 100 feet away from the train station because we had no passport. Well, Turns out all they were doing is giving us a visa, Yugoslav style, 1962. Yeah, that was common courtesy for Yugoslavia. Well, anti-communism is the way the New York Times ran this letter by Reed J. Irvine, who is either the president or the executive director or the mystic mainspring, I don't know what they call him. Chairman of Accuracy in Media, one of my favorite organizations. It says here, in an August the 8th column, Flora Lewis said, anti-communism is as sterile an ideology as communism itself, close the quote. Old hostilities die hard. Many who once saw in communism the wave of the future, the hope of the world, have grudgingly come to admit they were wrong. They now recognize the truth of what anti-communists have been trying to tell them for 63 years, that communism produces not utopia, but bloodshed, hunger, atrocities, distress, to quote the Czech ex-Marxist philosopher cited in the column. Nevertheless, it is hard for those who for so long derided anti-communists as fascists, even when they were anti-fascist, to admit that those critics were right in their assessment of communism. No credit must be given to those who were right all along. And having newly discovered that the fruit of Marxism is poisonous, they must still draw a line between themselves and those who knew it all along. They can't bring themselves to join the camp of the anti-communists. At that point, I stood up, standing applause, Reed. Perhaps it would help if they understood that anti-communism is not an ideology, sterile or otherwise. There is no anti-communist church or pope to which all of those who recognize the evils of communism owe allegiance. Anti-communists come in all shapes and sizes, adhering to a wide variety of political and economic philosophies. It might also help if they understood that neither communism nor anti-communism is sterile. Communism has demonstrated its fecundity. I don't mean to be condescending, but, you know, when I just learned a word in the past year, I sometimes give subtitles. Okay, that means fertility, proliferating. Communism has demonstrated its fecundity in producing poisonous fruits. Anti-communism, to the extent that it has succeeded in defeating communism, has permitted more humane systems of social organization to flourish. Read bullseye. Bullseye. What I'm aiming for is this. I want the excitement to spread to every other communist country. I want every communist official in those countries to hold their breath. Let me tell you what I want. I want what I saw in Yugoslavia. I was in Yugoslavia a few weeks before the Hungarian Revolution. Yugoslavia is right next to Hungary. It's a communist country. I was in Yugoslavia a few weeks before the Hungarian Revolution, and I was in Yugoslavia a few weeks after the Hungarians threw the communists out for 10 magic days. It was not the same Yugoslavia. In Yugoslavia before, the people were afraid of the secret police.
Wow.
After the Hungarian Revolution, the Yugoslav secret police were afraid of the people. I want every communist official on the planet Earth to be afraid of the public wrath. What distresses me, of course your intent is to distress me, in a way, limited mission accomplished, if that's how you get your kicks. It distresses me to hear an American giggling, chiding, japing that an outbreak of freedom is not going to spread. So don't get your hopes up, Farber, big buddy. These strikes ain't going to spread. Communist dictatorship firmly in command. You may be right, but must you be so cussedly glad of it? That after Afghanistan, the United States would indeed take a dim view, and the Soviet Union must bear full responsibility for any hostile action against Polish workers who are striking only for what they already have coming to them under the Helsinki Agreement, which Russia solemnly signed, and so forth and so on. The last thing I would do is tell the world that we have no intention of warning the Soviet Union because we fear such a warning would merely egg the Soviets on. The Soviet Union is being given the same advantage that we would give a volcano, a tropical storm, a tiger in the reeds on the loose. We are pretending that the Soviet Union is simply way out of everybody's control, and we would be very ill-advised indeed to anger the Soviet Union. I don't feel that way. That will be a very appropriate cowardly attitude within a few years, not now. I want the rights to put that face on a T-shirt and offer it at cost to anybody who would like a Polish Freedom T-shirt, since no profit is Americans, if they did perceive an embargo as an act of war, would all the more flockingly, palpitatingly, and resoundingly vote for that candidate now. We are sick.
You think we want to go to war?
No, but I think we are sick and emulsified at our weakness, our surrender attitude.
Do you want to go to war?
Surrender lobby.
Would you go to war for it?
The reason I want a tough America and a tough president and a revitalized defense establishment is precisely so that we will have to go neither to war nor into slavery, you see. And your tone of voice interests me more than anything either candidate has said, because you are posing the question from a position of 1962. Well, do you want to go to war? Do you mean better dead than red? Larry,
62.
No.
You've gone through Vietnam. If you think
a character assassination, bigotry, and above all, fairy tales to grown-ups in broad daylight. I know what you mean. The mean, arrogant, wealthy Republicans sneering, aloof as a Libyan camel, insensitive to the concerns of these beautiful, sweaty, throaty, third world masses.
Aloof as a Libyan camel?
Yeah.
It's only 11 minutes of 2. Slow down.
Ma'am, you ask, what will Reagan do to the working class? He will put the working class to work. I think he will do this by reverting to age-old, proven, free enterprise teachings and tactics which will get the government the hell out of the picture and let the economy function and, in fact, flourish. Nations may not recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. They may hate the fact that they, in a backhanded way, have to recognize Israel. I, as a journalist, simply do not recognize the United Nations. It has lost its importance. It's lost its symbolic importance. It never had any substantive importance.
It's a dining club.
Forget it.
I agree with people. The Eastern Europe domain is theirs. It is their colony. Therefore, the situation is people, they will rebel, but of course, finally they will be suppressed, they will be crushed, and the West will not do anything because the West is not prepared to do it either spiritually, morally, or diplomatically, or in any other sense. The West has developed an entirely different system of diplomacy based on utopias, and therefore the West will stay absolutely different as those people are crushed and that outburst of freedom suppressed.
All right, look.
They would like to take over the world peacefully. They don't like war. They believe, that if the police is competent, the people to be arrested must surrender and not fight with the police. And they believe that if the Soviet armed forces are really competent, the rest of the world should surrender and not engage in an unseemly scuffle with the Soviet global police, so to speak.
Well,
it's true that those people, by dint of their blood and their sacrifice, show the world that just that the human spirit is uncrushable and that all nations hanker for freedom and not only the editorial officers of the New York Times, as they sometimes imply.
For the survival of Western democracies costs nothing to get the information. If you want that information, just write democracies, make it plural, because we still have more than one. Democracies, Barry Farber, WMCA, New York, 10019. Just 11 of those are the most valuable voice of freedom with a Russian accent. About Jerusalem, may I say that for the first time in 1967, Jerusalem did become an international city. When the Jordanians held the eastern part, I am not going to labor you too close to dinner time over a family radio station with the details of what the Jordanian authorities not just allowed happen, but did physically to synagogues, Israeli cemeteries, everything that was holy to the Hebrew religion in East Jerusalem. Now, with what their enemies call the Israeli conquest, with what the Israelis look upon as a liberation, reunification of the city, Jerusalem is reunited and internationalized. Anybody can go there, and all holy places of all religions are, for a change now, under Israeli rule, respected.
Yes. I faced after my article with criticism of the CIA, and that criticism, mind you, is not the kind of criticism that has been
simply lavished on the CIA for years. You see, that kind of criticism is what about the immorality of the CIA, that the CIA is a criminal organization in general and so on and so forth, and it should be destroyed and so on. My criticism is different. I'm saying that the CIA is not competent, that this is a hoax and a fraud, that it has obtained no information, that all the information it presents is taken from Soviet pamphlets. And I wrote an article, it was published in 500 magazines in English and other languages, and after that I faced Admiral Turner, who is in charge of the CIA and practically in charge of all the agencies of intelligence in the United States. And when I presented that case, I said, Admiral, we are on the same side of the barricade. We have similar interests. There is no discrepancy between us as far as that is concerned, but your organization does not exist. If it consisted, I said, of Soviet agents only, it would do less harm, because Soviet agents wouldn't dare to mislead Congress and the public and the government of the United States as boldly and as sweetly and as serenely as you have been doing for decades, ever since the late 60s approximately. And of course, when I said that, I noticed that Turner winced. I thought, he's an honest man. At least he winced. He didn't smile instantly or anything like that. He winced. And after my speech, there was a dead silence. It was in Washington. It was a specially organized dinner for me to encounter Admiral Turner. There was a dead silence, and then one of the journalists said, Admiral, can you say anything in rebuttal? And he said very gravely, no. He could not rebut a single point of my article and of my presentation. What is the moral? The moral is that there are thousands of people, thousands upon thousands of journalists and scholars and experts and statesmen who are interested in the immorality, in the criminality of the CIA, who, there is a wide range of those people, from those, who simply expose, so to speak, American agents, for those who say that the CIA should concentrate on intelligence only and should not fight the global Soviet invisible army, the army of guerrillas and subversion all over the world, and so on and so forth. But I am fighting practically single-handed to expose the incompetence of the CIA, which is a different point, and which is extremely important. You understand, when you go to a hospital to be operated on, it is not only important that the surgeon operating on your heart be a moral man and obey laws and never beat his wife. It is important that he should be a specialist and not a quack, and not a fool who doesn't know anything about medicine.
Okay.
That time. And while we were in Cuba, we met with Fidel, and we met with Che Guevara and a number of other people. But the money actually came to us after a meeting was held at the Central Committee of the Communist Party of Cuba. And following that meeting, Fidel Castro handed the money to another man, and then the money was divided up.
Personally gave me $20,000 cash to promote communist revolution in America. That's because Castro is Moscow's trigger man. For example, Castro's Russian-made jets recently sank a Bahamian ship and machine-gunned the survivors. Then Castro's pilots drove off an American rescue helicopter. Castro is also the Soviets' hired gun behind the Puerto Rican terrorist group FALN. With Castro's help, FALN terrorists have carried out over 100 bombings right here in the United States. What's more, these Castro-backed terror bombings killed almost a dozen innocent Americans like you. You can see the communist threat is at our doorstep. Terror bombings in American cities. Revolutionaries roaming our country. Don't you think it's time Americans knew about the growing Soviet-Cuban stranglehold to the South? See, your government Castro is out to get America. He wants a communist revolution right here in the country. Castro gave me $20,000. In 1963, I was pro-communist and pro-Castro. That's because I was also young and confused. I was so misguided, I went to Cuba in open defiance of State Department regulations and American law. While in Havana, I often talked with Castro. Castro was training communists from around the world. I had lunch with the Viet Cong representative. I also met with communist revolutionaries from Nicaragua, Guatemala, and many other Caribbean countries. Under Castro's guidance, I learned how to blow up buildings and use automatic weapons. But weapons weren't most important to Castro. When Castro gave me the $20,000, he emphasized propaganda was more effective than bombs. He told me to stir up hatred for the police, government, and anyone in authority. Following Castro's advice, my communist group published all sorts of lies about the New York City police. We also trained, coming toward the end now, revolutionaries in the use of weapons and explosives. But Castro told me to emphasize propaganda, so I did. And you know, Castro was right. Propaganda from my communist group, writes Philip Abbott Luce, helped ignite a riot in New York City. American city is safe. With Soviet money and Cuban training, terrorists can strike anywhere in the United States. I know, writes Philip Abbott Luce, I was part of Castro's scheme of taking over America.
What was it, 3 weeks ago? We came out with a news conference in which we released the FBI file on actress Jean Seberg, who a year ago all the media were saying that the FBI had admitted that they had helped destroy her reputation by spreading the story, the gossip that she had been made pregnant by a Black Panther leader. And that the publication of the FBI planted this story with the press, and that the publication of this unhinged her and caused her subsequent problems and so on. And the file showed that it was true that she thought that the father of her child was the Black Panther leader, and B, that the FBI, although it had had the idea of planting the story, had actually not gone ahead and done so. And the story had leaked out to the press from other sources. After we got these corrective stories, and including a corrective editorial, Barry, in the Washington Post, the lead editorial a week ago admitted that they had NBC, and tonight it will be corrected on ABC and CBS News, which says that this mistake is the last holdout.
Thank the Washington Post for broadening my vocabulary. If it hadn't been for them, I'd never know what the word retromagent meant. And they said it about you. And get up, okay?
Well, I'll tell you, Barry, you're going to frustrate a lot of people because they can't find it in Webster's Unabridged. I think the only dictionary you can find it in is the Oxford English Dictionary.
Oh, really?
Buckley did a column about it, and he pointed out that they derived it from the Latin, and I guess you're a better linguist than I am. What is the Latin? To urinate.
Top official of the Washington Post applied to, you are a
miserable, carping, retromingent vigilante.
Okay. Sounds like my favorite kind of person. Thank you very much. I remember election night, thinking that we had it for about the first 6 minutes. It looked so good. The first return train was closing in. A major New York columnist threw up his hands, and I mean, when I read that column, I didn't recognize myself or anybody. A major columnist, I don't feel like he was afraid Bella was going to lose to the Neanderthal hordes rampaging across the 19th Congressional District. He was throwing up his hands. Put out a piece of campaign literature that said, Barry Farber has no political past. And we hit right back with a piece of campaign literature that said, Bella Abzug does have a political past, and if more people knew about it, she wouldn't have a political future. Bella's car came right by and saw all of us, my whole team, passing out literature to the people down there. And Bella pulled the car over, had the driver pull the car over to where my father was on the corner handing out literature. And she rolled down the window and just yelled, Mr. Farber, you got a bad boy.